The first thing I noticed when Claire opened the door was that every light in her apartment was on. The porch light, the narrow lamp beside the couch, the pendant over the kitchen island, even the little brass reading lamp in the corner that she said made the room feel like an old library. All of them glowed warmly behind her, which made the dead bulb she had called me about seem less like an emergency and more like an excuse. I stood there holding my toolbox in one hand and a new LED bulb in the other. "You said the kitchen light went out," I said. "It did." I looked past her. The kitchen was bright enough to perform surgery. Claire followed my eyes and tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "The one over the sink, that one was off." I stepped inside, and she closed the door too carefully, as if noise might break something fragile between us. Her apartment smelled like cinnamon and coffee. 2 plates sat on the table. Not takeout containers, plates, cloth napkins, a bottle of red wine she knew I liked. I raised the bulb. "This feels like a lot of preparation for a basic home repair." Her mouth curved, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "You're leaving Friday." There it was. I set the toolbox down. "Claire, just fix the light first." I had known her for 3 years, long enough to recognize the tone she used when she was trying to keep her courage from slipping. So I carried a step stool to the sink, climbed up, and twisted the glass shade free. The bulb wasn't burned out, it was loose. One turn, and it came on. I looked down at her. "You could have fixed that." "I know." The room went quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Claire folded her arms, then unfolded them. "I didn't ask you over because of the bulb. I figured. I asked because I need to say something before you move to Phoenix, and if I waited until Friday, I'd lose my nerve." I stepped off the stool. Suddenly the apartment felt smaller. She took a breath. "I don't want you to go." I opened my mouth, but she lifted a hand. "Not because you fix things. Not because you carry groceries or check my smoke detectors, or show up when my car won't start. I don't want you to go because every ordinary day is better when you're in it." Her voice trembled once, then steadied. "I'm in love with you, Daniel. And what I really wanted tonight was to ask whether you could imagine staying and building a life with me." For the first time in years, I had no useful answer. No tool, no repair, no practical thing I could do with my hands. I just stood there, holding a perfectly good light bulb, while the woman I loved asked me for the one thing I was most afraid to give. Before I tell you what I said, and why I nearly ruined everything, take a moment to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments, would you risk a good friendship for the chance at real love? I wish I could say I crossed the kitchen, took Claire in my arms, and told her the truth. The truth was that I had loved her for longer than I wanted to admit. Instead, I looked at the packed boxes stacked near my front door in the apartment across the hall, thought about the contract waiting for me in Arizona, and felt panic rise like a locked gate inside my chest. "Claire," I said, "you don't mean that." Her face changed, not dramatically. Claire never performed pain for anyone. Her shoulders simply became still. "I know what I mean. You're upset because I'm leaving. I'm upset because I love you. You've had a difficult year. The bookstore, your dad's surgery, the rent increase. Don't. I'm just saying maybe I've been around so much that I'm confused." I should have stopped. Instead, I kept talking because fear often sounds reasonable when it borrows the language of concern. "I think you're grateful, and I think gratitude can feel like something else when you're scared of losing support." Claire stared at me as if I had slapped away something she had offered with both hands. "You think I asked you to stay because I need free labor? No, that's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant." She walked to the table and removed one of the plates. Her movements were calm, which made the shame worse. I put the new bulb on the counter. "I care about you, but not enough to believe me. That isn't fair." "No, Daniel. What isn't fair is deciding what I feel, because my answer makes you uncomfortable." I had no defense. She carried the plate to the sink and set it down beneath the light I had just fixed. "You should go," she said. I picked up my toolbox. At the door, I turned back. "I'm sorry." Claire looked at the glowing bulb above the sink. "So am I." The door closed behind me with a quiet click. That sound followed me across the hall. My apartment looked temporary, stripped down to cardboard boxes and bare walls. I had accepted a 12-month contract with an electrical systems company in Phoenix because it paid well, offered a management track, and gave me a clean reason to leave a life that had started asking more of me than repairs. I told myself it was a career decision. Standing in the dark of my living room, I knew that was only half true. Claire Hayes had moved into apartment 3B on a rainy Saturday in October, carrying a box of books so overloaded that the bottom split in the hallway. I was kneeling beside an outlet in 3A when I heard the crash. By the time I stepped outside, paperbacks were scattered across the floor, and Claire was sitting in the middle of them, laughing. "Please tell me you didn't see that," she said. "I'm an electrician. We're trained to ignore structural failures outside our specialty." She held up a copy of Jane Austen. "This is a literary emergency." I helped her gather the books. She learned I was renovating the apartment across the hall for myself after years of traveling from job to job. I learned she managed a small independent bookstore called Second Story, 6 blocks away, and that she believed every home needed 3 things: good coffee, a comfortable chair, and at least one lamp with warm light. Our friendship grew in small, unremarkable ways. She left a muffin at my door when I worked early. I replaced a bad dimmer in her living room. She invited me to trivia night with her employees. I helped her father install grab bars after knee surgery. She remembered the anniversary of my mother's death without making me talk about it. Nothing dramatic happened. That was what made it dangerous. Claire became part of the structure of my days. I knew how she took her coffee, which songs she hummed while searching for her keys, and how she went silent when worried, instead of filling the room with nervous words. She knew I hated olives, slept badly before big inspections, and kept my mother's old recipe card taped inside a kitchen cabinet, even though I never cooked from it. For 3 years, we stayed on the safe side of almost. There were moments when the distance between us narrowed. Her hand resting on my arm after I made her laugh. My coat around her shoulders while we waited for a tow truck. A winter evening when she fell asleep against me during a movie, and I didn't move for nearly an hour. Each time, I found a reason to step back. My father had been charming, affectionate, and unreliable. He promised permanence the way other men promised dinner, then disappeared whenever responsibility became inconvenient. After my mother died, I found boxes of letters he had sent over the years, apologies, plans, declarations that never became action. I built my adult life around being the opposite of him. I showed up. I kept promises. I paid bills early. I fixed what I could. But I never made promises that might expose how badly I could fail. Claire did not know all of that. She knew my father had left. She knew I did not speak to him. She did not know that every time I imagined loving someone openly, I also imagined becoming the man I despised. The next morning after her confession, I woke before dawn on the couch, fully dressed. The new light bulb was still in my jacket pocket. At 7, I heard Claire's door open. I waited, then stepped into the hall. She was wearing a navy coat and carrying a cardboard tray with 4 coffees for her staff. Her eyes met mine for a second. "Morning," I said. "Morning. I'd like to explain. I have to open the store. It'll take a minute. That's what people say when they want 10. She walked toward the stairs. "Claire, I wasn't trying to insult you." She stopped, but did not turn around. "I know," she said. "You were trying to protect yourself. You just used me to do it." Then she kept walking. I stood in the hallway with the sharp, uncomfortable awareness that she understood me better than I understood myself. At work, I made mistakes. Not dangerous ones. I checked every connection twice, and my apprentice, Matteo, was experienced enough to catch the small things. But I measured conduit wrong, left my gloves in the truck, and stared at a panel schedule for so long that Matteo finally leaned against the wall and said, "You want to tell me whose heart you broke?" "No." "Your heart, then?" I gave him a look. He shrugged. "You only get that quiet when something matters." Matteo was 26, and annoyingly observant. He had worked with me for 2 years, and the Phoenix Company had offered him a position too. He had declined because his wife was expecting their first child. "You still leaving Friday?" he asked. "Yes." "Then whatever it is has a deadline." I returned to the panel. "Not everything can be solved by talking." "No," he said, "but a surprising amount can be made worse by not talking." By lunch, I had decided to go to Second Story and apologize properly. When I arrived, Claire was behind the register helping an older customer order a mystery novel. She was warm, patient, completely herself. For one foolish second, I imagined that the night before had not changed anything. Then she saw me. Her smile faded, though her professional tone remained intact. "I'll be right with you." I walked toward the back, where a narrow hallway led to her office. On the wall hung photographs from author events and children's reading hours. I had installed the track lights above them the previous spring. Claire joined me a few minutes later. "I came to apologize," I said. "No explanations." She waited. "You told me something honest. I responded by questioning your judgment. That was disrespectful and cowardly. I'm sorry." Some of the tension left her face, but not enough to restore what I had damaged. Thank you. I never thought you were using me. You thought I couldn't tell the difference between love and dependence. I looked down. Yes. And do you still think that? The right answer was no. The honest answer was more complicated. I don't know what I think. Claire nodded slowly. Then that's your answer. It doesn't have to be. It does for now. She moved toward the store, then paused. I got a job offer yesterday, she said. My chest tightened. Where? Portland. Oregon? There's only one Portland people mean when they're trying to change their life. What kind of job? Program director for a nonprofit literacy network. Better salary? Real budget? Benefits. What about the bookstore? I've been trying to keep it alive for 18 months. You know that. I did know. I had watched her negotiate with the landlord, organize fundraisers and work late after laying off one of her part-time employees. She loved Second Story, but love had not made the numbers kinder. Are you taking it? I told them I'd decide by Monday. Monday, 3 days after I was supposed to leave, the deadline Mateo had mentioned became real. Claire looked at me with a sadness that held no accusation. I didn't ask you to stay because I needed saving, Daniel. I asked because I was deciding whether this town still held the future I wanted. Then she returned to the register, leaving me alone beneath lights I had installed, and never once considered might illuminate a life without me. I spent Thursday evening packing. At least, that was what I intended to do. Instead, I moved the same stack of work shirts from one box to another and listened for footsteps in the hallway. Claire came home at 8. Her key turned. Her door opened and closed. I stood with my hand on my doorknob. Then I let go. My sister called 10 minutes later. Nora was 4 years older than me and had inherited our mother's ability to detect trouble from 200 miles away. You sound terrible, she said after I answered. Good to hear from you too. Are you sick? No? Did the Phoenix job disappear? No. Then this is about Claire. I sank onto a sealed box marked kitchen. How did you get there? Because every conversation we've had for 3 years eventually gets there. I told her what had happened. Not elegantly. I summarized Claire's confession, my response, and the Portland offer, while Nora remained unusually quiet. When I finished, she said, You told the woman you love that she doesn't know her own mind. I didn't say I love her. You didn't have to. I'm leaving tomorrow. That isn't a moral argument. It's a contract. Contracts can be declined, and reputations can be damaged. Yes, choices cost things. I rubbed my forehead. You make it sound simple. No, I'm making it sound like a choice. You make everything sound like weather, as if life just happens over your head, and you're the responsible man holding an umbrella. I stared at the bare wall. Nora softened. Danny, Dad did not hurt us because he loved people badly. He hurt us because he kept promising what he had no intention of practicing. You've spent your whole life practicing loyalty without ever promising it. That doesn't make you like him. It just makes you lonely. The words landed hard because they were true. After we hung up, I opened the cabinet above the stove and removed my mother's recipe card. The edges were soft from age. Her handwriting described how to make chicken soup, but at the bottom she had added a line that had nothing to do with food. Don't wait until you're certain. Care is something you do while you're afraid. I had read it 100 times and treated it like a memory instead of advice. Across the hall, something thudded. Then Claire said a word she rarely used. I opened my door. Her apartment door stood ajar. Inside, she was on the floor beside a collapsed bookshelf. Books covered the rug. One end of the tall wooden case had pulled away from the wall. Are you hurt? I asked. She looked up, startled and irritated. I'm fine. I stepped inside before she could object. Did it hit you? No. I examined the shelf. One anchor had torn loose. This should have been secured into a stud. I know a man who usually tells me things like that. I deserved it. Together, we lifted the shelf upright. The familiar rhythm of working beside her returned despite the tension. She sorted books while I found the wall stud and replaced both anchors with heavier hardware. On her coffee table sat a legal pad divided into 2 columns. Stay and go. I tried not to read it, but the words were large. Under stay, Dad nearby. My staff, Second Story. Home. Under go, stability. Growth. Fresh start. No waiting. That final line tightened something in me. Claire saw where I was looking and flipped the pad over. Sorry, I said. You're good at that lately. I drove the last screw into place and tested the shelf. It'll hold. Thank you. I gathered my tools, but neither of us moved toward the door. Why didn't you tell me about Portland? I asked. Because I hadn't decided. And because I didn't want my confession to sound like an ultimatum. Was it? No. She met my eyes. I wanted you to choose me, not surrender to a deadline. What would choosing you look like? Her expression shifted. A small opening guarded by caution. It would look like honesty. A first date. A conversation about what we both want. It would look like not running to Arizona because this became real. I accepted that job before you said anything. You accepted it after I asked whether you'd ever thought about us. That memory surfaced with painful clarity. 3 weeks earlier, we had been walking home from dinner. Claire had asked lightly, "Have you ever wondered what would happen if we stopped pretending we're only friends?" I had made a joke about our lease agreements becoming complicated. The next morning, I called Phoenix. She had seen the connection even when I refused to. "I'm scared," I said. Claire's eyes softened, but she did not step closer. "Of me? Of becoming someone who makes promises and fails? That isn't the only way to fail someone." I nodded. "I'm beginning to understand that. Understanding isn't choosing." "No." She waited. I wanted to tell her I would stay. The words rose, but fear asked for certainty, and certainty did not exist. "I need time," I said. Claire looked toward the legal pad. "You have until tomorrow," she said. "Not because I'm forcing you, because after tomorrow, you'll be gone." I left her apartment carrying my tools and the knowledge that time was no longer something I could use to hide. Friday morning arrived clear and cold. My truck was packed by 6. The apartment looked erased. Only the couch remained, waiting for the donation company, and one cardboard box sat on the counter with the things I would carry myself. My mother's recipe card, a framed photograph of Nora and me, and the loose bulb from Claire's kitchen. I held that bulb in my palm and understood something humiliating. Claire had created a harmless problem because she trusted me to come. That was how she loved, not with grand performances, but with a place set at the table, and faith that I would knock on her door. I had come. Then I had treated her love like faulty wiring. At 7, I called the Phoenix project manager. Graham answered on the second ring. "You on the road?" "Not yet." "Good. I need you at the site office Monday by 8. I looked through my open apartment door at Claire's closed one. "I can't take the position." The silence on his end was sharp. "You signed an offer." "I know. We declined 2 other candidates because you committed." "I know, and I'm sorry. I'll reimburse the relocation advance today. I'll also send you the contact information for 2 qualified supervisors." "Is this a money issue?" "No." "Then what changed?" I could have said family emergency, health, anything that made the decision sound unavoidable. "I changed," I said. Graham was angry, and he had a right to be. He reminded me that the company might not consider me again. I accepted that. By the end of the call, my management track had vanished. My professional reputation had a bruise, and I felt more honest than I had in years. I crossed the hall and knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Her door opened a few inches. Claire wore a gray sweater, jeans, and the expression of someone who had slept as badly as I had. "I turned down Phoenix," I said. Her fingers tightened around the door. "Why?" "Because I don't want to leave." "That's not the same as wanting to stay with me." "I know." The door opened wider. "I love you," I said. Claire closed her eyes briefly. I continued before fear could reorganize the words. "I love your terrible habit of reading the last page first. I love that you carry dog treats even though you don't own a dog. I love that you make every person in your store feel as if the book they need is already waiting for them. I love the way you built a home across the hall from mine without ever asking me to become smaller to fit inside it." She looked at me, but the hurt remained. I should have said it Wednesday. I should have said it months ago. I didn't, because I thought avoiding a promise was the same as avoiding failure. "Daniel, I'm not asking you to reject Portland because I made one brave phone call. And I'm not asking you to trust a speech. I'm asking for the first date you offered. I'm asking for the chance to practice this, instead of pretending I need to know the ending before I begin." For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she asked, "Did you turn down Phoenix before you came over?" "Yes. You shouldn't have done that for me. I did it for the life I want." "You're part of that life, but you aren't responsible for my decision." Something in her face softened. "When?" she asked. "When what?" "When is this first date?" Relief hit me so quickly I almost laughed. "Tonight? I have inventory until 9:30. The diner on Oak closes at 10. Then I'll cook." Her eyebrows rose. "You?" "I have a recipe." That finally brought a real smile. "Fine," she said. "One date. One honest date." She pointed at me. "You don't get points for honesty if you only use it when you're about to lose something." "I know. And I haven't decided about Portland." "I know that too." She studied me. perhaps checking whether my agreement was another performance. "Dinner at 9:30, she said. Then she closed the door, not coldly this time, but with the smallest smile still visible. I spent the day unpacking enough of my kitchen to cook my mother's soup. At 8:40, Claire texted. "Emergency at the store, power flickering, smell near the panel." I was in my truck before I finished reading. Second story occupied the first floor of a century-old brick building. When I arrived, Claire and her 2 employees were guiding customers outside. Rain had begun to fall, thin and icy. "What happened?" I asked. "Lights dimmed twice," Claire said. "Then Maya smelled something burning in the office. I shut off the main disconnect and opened the service panel. One breaker connection had overheated. The insulation around the conductor had darkened, and the bus showed damage. This panel needs work," I said. "You can't reopen tonight." Claire looked through the front window at the stacks of books, the display tables, and the handwritten sign advertising the weekend reading festival she had planned for months. "The festival starts tomorrow. Not with this panel. Can it be fixed?" "Yes, but I need parts. And the landlord has to authorize anything permanent." Her landlord, Mr. Talbot, arrived 20 minutes later in a cashmere coat and an expression of practiced inconvenience. He listened while I explained the hazard. "So replace the breaker," he said. "The connection overheated at the bus. A new breaker alone isn't safe." "How much?" I gave him a rough range. He looked at Claire. "The lease expires in 6 weeks. I'm not investing that kind of money if the tenant is leaving." Claire went still. "I haven't said I'm leaving." "You asked about early termination." I asked what the terms were. Talbot shrugged. "Same difference." It was not the same difference, but I understood what Claire was hearing. The store she had fought to save was now tied to a building owner who saw her uncertainty as an opportunity to avoid responsibility. "I can install a temporary safe feed for limited lighting and registers," I said. "But not tonight, and only if the city inspector approves it." "Who pays?" Talbot asked. "I will," Claire said. "No," I said at the same time. She turned to me. I lowered my voice. "Let me help. I don't want rescuing." "This isn't rescue. It's my work. You've hired electricians before. I can't afford your normal rate." "Then we write a payment plan." Talbot glanced between us. "I'll approve temporary work if it costs me nothing." Claire's jaw tightened. "Send that in writing." When he left, she leaned against the counter. "This is exactly why Portland makes sense," she said. I wanted to argue. Instead, I said, "Yes." She looked surprised. "You deserve stability," I continued, "and a landlord who repairs dangerous equipment. If Portland is what you want, I won't make you feel guilty for choosing it. What do you want? You. But not trapped." The store was dark except for the emergency lights, and rain traced silver lines down the windows. Claire stepped closer. "Dinner is probably ruined," she said. "The soup can wait." "So can the first date?" I looked at the damaged panel, then at her. "No," I said. "The location changed." We sat on the floor behind the register and ate vending machine crackers with 2 cups of coffee from the cafe next door. We talked until midnight, not about Phoenix or Portland at first, but about our first jobs, worst haircuts, favorite childhood meals, and the books Claire reread when she felt lost. It was the first time we had been alone together without pretending the closeness meant nothing. At midnight, she rested her shoulder against mine. "This is a strange first date," she said. "I've had worse. Have you?" "No." She laughed softly. I turned toward her. "Can I kiss you?" Claire held my gaze. "Yes." The kiss was gentle, brief, and more frightening than any risk I had taken that morning because it made the future feel possible. When we separated, she touched her forehead to mine. "I still might go," she whispered. "I know. And this might hurt. I know." "Are you going to keep saying that?" "Only when it's true." She smiled, but tears shone in her eyes. For the first time, I understood that courage did not erase uncertainty. It simply gave us something honest to do inside it. The next 2 days became a test of whether honesty could survive ordinary pressure. Matteo met me at the store before sunrise Saturday. I paid him for the weekend and made it clear that helping me was optional. He looked around at the dark shelves. "So this is why Phoenix lost its supervisor." "This is one reason. The other reason has dark hair and owns all these books?" "Get the cable." We installed a temporary distribution setup that met code, and the city inspector approved limited operation by noon. Claire moved the children's events to the bright front half of the store, while we kept the office and rear aisle closed. Customers came anyway. Parents sat on folding chairs. Children listened to stories under strings of battery-powered lanterns. People bought more books than Claire expected, because she told them plainly what had happened. I watched her stand before the crowd and refused to turn hardship into shame. That afternoon, she received the formal Portland offer. She read the email in her office while I labeled circuits nearby. "They need an answer tomorrow," she said. "What are you leaning toward?" "I don't know." "What would you choose if I weren't here?" She considered it. "That's impossible to answer now." "Try." Claire sat on the edge of her desk. "I want the work. I want the security. But I don't want to leave my dad, my staff, or this community. I also don't want to spend another 5 years begging a landlord to care whether the building catches fire." "What would staying require?" "A new plan for the store. Maybe a smaller location. Maybe becoming a non-profit community bookstore with paid literacy programs." She sighed. "That takes money, legal help, and time. What if you had the first year's electrical work donated?" She gave me a warning look. "I'm not buying your future," I said. "I'm offering one piece of what I know how to do." "You'd still choose the model. Find funding. Build the board and run it." "Why?" "Because I believe in the work. Also because I love you. Both can be true." She looked at the rows of books beyond the office doorway. "I need to know that staying won't become a debt between us." "It won't. And if we date and it doesn't work, I'll still finish any work I formally commit to." "You've thought about this." "I'm learning to make plans that include feelings, instead of using plans to avoid them." Claire smiled. That sounded rehearsed. It was, in the truck. On Sunday morning, she declined Portland. "Not for me," she insisted. For a version of her life she had nearly abandoned because exhaustion had made distance look like the only form of change. She negotiated a short lease extension, announced that Second Story would relocate, and began meeting with a local foundation about creating a literacy nonprofit. I rented a small workshop on the edge of town and opened Carter Electrical Services with Mateo as my first full-time employee and eventual partner. None of it was easy. Claire and I had our second date in a real restaurant and argued about whether she worked too late. Our third date ended early because I received an emergency service call. On our fifth, she asked about my father, and I answered instead of changing the subject. 2 months later, I drove with Nora to visit him. I did not go to repair the past. I went because silence had been deciding too much of my life. My father apologized. I listened. I told him forgiveness was not the same as immediate trust. For once, I left without either attacking him or pretending his choices had not mattered. When I returned, Claire was waiting on the steps outside my apartment. "How was it?" she asked. "Hard." She held out her hand. I took it. That simple act became our pattern. We did not promise never to be afraid. We promised not to let fear speak for the other person. By spring, Claire found a new home for Second Story in a former neighborhood bank. The vault became a reading room. The old teller counter became the checkout desk. I rewired the entire building with Mateo and 2 apprentices. Claire paid my company through a grant because she had been serious about boundaries, and I had learned that respecting her independence was one way of loving her well. On opening night, warm pendant lights glowed above every aisle. Claire found me alone near the children's section, checking an outlet cover for the 3rd time. "It's finished," she said. "Nothing is ever finished. That is a terrible philosophy for a contractor." She slipped her hand into mine. Around us, families entered. Volunteers arranged chairs, and her father proudly showed strangers the accessible reading area. "Do you regret staying?" she asked. I thought about Phoenix, the lost promotion, the uncertainty of running my own company, and the life that had grown from one honest decision. "No. Even when payroll is due, ask me after Tuesday." She laughed and leaned into me. "I love you," I said. "I know." I looked at her. She smiled. "And I love you too." A year after the night of the loose bulb, Claire asked me to come across the hall because her kitchen light was out again. By then, we spent most nights together, though we had kept both apartments while we learned what kind of shared life we wanted. I arrived with my toolbox out of habit. Every light in her apartment was on. I stopped in the doorway. "You're getting predictable. The bulb over the sink is actually dead this time." I checked. It was. When I stepped down from the stool, Claire stood beside the table. 2 plates waited there, just as they had a year earlier. Beside them lay a brass key. "What's that?" I asked. "The bookstore building has a small apartment upstairs," she said. "The foundation approved converting it. I thought we could rent it together, if you're ready." For a moment, I was speechless again. But this time, silence was not a hiding place. It was simply joy, arriving faster than words. I picked up the key. "I'm ready." Claire searched my face. "You're sure?" No, I said, and her eyebrows lifted. I'm not certain about every hard day we'll have, or every mistake I'll make, but I'm sure I want to face them with you. She came around the table and wrapped her arms around me. That's a much better answer, she whispered. I kissed her beneath the new light, then carried the 2 plates to the table while she opened the wine. Later, after dinner, we stood at the window looking across the street at the glowing sign above 2nd story. I understood at last that love was not a promise that nothing would break. It was the choice to stay present, tell the truth, and repair what could be repaired together. Claire had called me to fix a light bulb. What she really wanted was a future, and the greatest surprise of my life was discovering that I wanted the same one. The move upstairs happened slowly. We argued over closet space, laughed over duplicate coffee makers, and spent a Saturday deciding where to hang my mother's recipe card. Claire chose the kitchen cabinet beside the stove. I chose the frame. Neither of us called those small decisions romantic, but they were. They were proof that a shared life was not built in one dramatic evening. It was assembled in ordinary choices, each one saying, I am still here. If this story touched you, share in the comments whether love is proven more by words or by the choices we repeat every day. And subscribe for more stories about ordinary moments that quietly change 2 lives forever.